Keanu Reeves had just stepped into the sleek, glass and steel building of the tech company, feeling that familiar sense of routine wash over him. Another typical day at the office. But today was different. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Meeting with the CEO in 10 minutes. He insists it's urgent." Keanu frowned, his gut twisted. The CEO, Richard Mallory, was the type of guy who made every conversation feel like an interrogation. Arrogant, dismissive, a man who thrived on control. But Keanu hadn't been expecting anything out of the ordinary. Maybe some new initiative or project to discuss. What he didn't expect was to walk into the CEO's office and be handed a one-way ticket out of the company. "Keanu, we're letting you go," Richard said, his voice cold and detached, barely making eye contact. Keanu stood frozen for a moment, a mix of disbelief and confusion clouding his mind. He opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, Richard continued, "It's just not working out. We need someone who can keep up with the fast pace of this company. I've made my decision." "What do you mean?" "I've been with the company for years. I've put everything into this," Keanu replied, his voice strained. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he couldn't find the words to say what he really felt, the deep sting of betrayal. Richard didn't flinch. In fact, his gaze seemed to harden. "I'm sure you've done your best, but we need someone with more drive, someone who isn't bogged down by personal attachments. You know how it is, Keanu?" Keanu's mind raced. He'd never seen Richard so indifferent, so casually cruel. For all the years he'd spent trying to contribute, to bring his ideas to life, to innovate. This was the thanks he got. Suddenly, everything clicked. The late nights, the pressure, the unspoken tension. The CEO had never seen Keanu as anything more than a tool, a cog in the machine, easily replaced. Just like that. Fired, dismissed without a second thought. Keanu's heart sank, but something inside him ignited. This wasn't right. He wasn't going to let this slide. He wasn't going to let Richard Mallory, this arrogant, self-serving man, get away with destroying his career and the careers of so many others who'd been chewed up by the company's corporate machine. Before he left the office, Richard muttered, "You'll get your severance package. That's it. Nothing more to say." Keanu paused at the door, feeling a strange calm wash over him. "You're wrong," he said, turning back. "I'm not done here." As he walked out of the office, his mind raced with one question. What's next? What would you do if you were suddenly fired like Keanu? How would you handle the shock? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see what happens next in this shocking journey. Keanu Reeves wasn't just another actor. He was a symbol of humility, sincerity, and an unwavering dedication to his craft. Born in Beirut to a mother who worked as a costume designer and a father who was often absent, Keanu's childhood was far from easy. His family moved frequently, sometimes across cities, sometimes across countries. But through it all, Keanu had a sense of resilience, a quiet determination that no matter how difficult life got, he could make it through. As a young man, Keanu's heart was never in the fast-paced, shallow world of Hollywood fame. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate his career, far from it, but fame never held much appeal to him. He'd found success in Hollywood through hard work, not flashy premieres. What he valued most was the chance to make meaningful connections, to tell stories that mattered, and to help people in ways that went beyond the screen. But there was always an itch, an unsettling feeling in the back of his mind. It wasn't the movie sets that got to him. It was the corporate world, the place he'd turned to after realizing his acting career wasn't as fulfilling as it once was. He'd wanted to be part of something bigger, to make a real impact. So Keanu joined the tech company, bringing his wealth of creativity and leadership skills into the business. However, what he found wasn't the innovative, open-minded company he'd hoped for. Instead, it was a culture driven by greed, competition, and egos. Richard Mallory, the CEO, epitomized everything Keanu had hoped to avoid. A man in his early 50s, Mallory had built his empire by stepping on others, using manipulation, and rewarding sycophants rather than those with true talent. Keanu had always tried to keep his head down, focusing on the work. But over time he began to notice the cracks in the company's foundation. The employees he admired were slowly being let go, dismissed with no explanation, their careers discarded. Keanu himself had experienced moments of doubt. The frustration had built up for months as Mallory took credit for ideas that weren't his and undermined the hard work of those around him. But Keanu had stayed quiet until today. Keanu's family had always been his rock. His sister, a schoolteacher in a small town in Oregon, was his closest confidant. She had seen him struggle to balance his passion for the creative and the corporate world and had always encouraged him to follow his instincts. "You've got a heart for what's right, Keanu," she told him once, "but don't let the world break that heart. Don't lose yourself in it." His friends from the acting days, Emma especially, had kept him grounded. She was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp wit and a heart of gold, someone who'd seen both the highs and lows of his life. Emma had often warned him about the darker side of the corporate world, the kind of people who would use him and toss him aside when they were done. But Keanu had thought he could navigate that world. Now as he walked out of the office building, the weight of her warnings felt heavier than ever. As he stood on the sidewalk, staring at the towering glass building that represented his last hope for a meaningful career, Keanu wondered what went wrong. He wasn't just angry about the firing, he was disappointed. Disappointed that he'd allowed himself to be sucked into a world that was everything he'd despised. Now he had a choice to make. Would he walk away quietly, collecting his severance, and letting it all go? Or would he fight back? Keanu felt a deep sense of unease within him. His instincts told him he couldn't just walk away. There were too many people who were suffering at the hands of people like Richard Mallory, too many lives destroyed for nothing. It was in that moment, standing in the shadow of the corporate tower that had once promised him a future, that Keanu knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to be a victim. He wasn't going to let Mallory or anyone else dictate his worth. There was more to this story, and he wasn't going to let it end like this. Keanu sent a quick text to Emma. "I need your help. Something's not right here. Meet me soon." If you were in Keanu's shoes, how would you react to being stuck in a toxic work environment? Would you fight back or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed so you can see what happens next in this gripping tale. Keanu couldn't stop thinking about the moment he was fired. The more he replayed it in his mind, the more he realized just how wrong everything felt. Richard Mallory, with his smug expression, had handed him the dismissal as if it were no more significant than a casual chat. But Keanu knew there was more to the story. The man had practically kicked him out without a single word of appreciation for his work, for his years of service. It was as though Keanu was just another expendable piece in a corporate game. That night, Keanu sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone. The world outside seemed to blur as he searched for answers. How could someone like Mallory, arrogant, power-hungry, reach the top, while people who genuinely worked hard were tossed aside? He typed out a message to Emma. "Something's not adding up. I need you to meet me tomorrow." Emma had always been Keanu's most trusted confidant, and he needed her sharp insight now more than ever. She'd been through enough corporate battles herself to recognize when something was off. The next day they met at a small coffee shop near Keanu's apartment. The familiar smell of espresso beans and warm pastries did little to calm Keanu's nerves. Emma was already there, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she sipped her coffee. "Talk to me," Emma said, setting her cup down. "You're looking like you just walked out of a nightmare." Keanu exhaled deeply, sitting across from her. "I'm not sure what happened, Em. One minute I'm working on a new project and the next I'm fired. No reason, no warning, just dismissed." "Something doesn't feel right about this," Emma said, her tone serious. "You're a key player at that company. This doesn't make sense." "I know," Keanu replied, shaking his head. "I've been thinking about it all night, and I'm starting to wonder if this wasn't about me at all. What if it's bigger than that?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I think it's about control, about the way Mallory's been running the company," Keanu said, his voice growing more intense. "I've been hearing things, whispers from other people at the office. Some of them are scared to speak up, but there's talk of him manipulating situations, playing people against each other, cutting out anyone who gets too close to the truth. Emma's expression hardened. What kind of truth? Something's off, Keanu repeated. It's not just bad management. It feels like Mallory's using people, and I don't think he cares who gets hurt. I'm starting to think this isn't just about me. It's about the entire company. Emma leaned in closer. You're saying Mallory's up to something bigger? Like what? Fraud, corruption? Keanu nodded. Exactly. I'm not sure how deep it goes, but I'm starting to believe that it's worse than just a toxic work environment. This could be something much more dangerous. Emma stared at him for a long moment, taking in his words. And you want to do something about it? I can't just walk away, Em, Keanu said, his voice filled with resolve. If I stay silent, this will keep happening to other people. Maybe even worse, I need to figure out what's really going on. Emma sighed, her fingers tapping the edge of her coffee cup. All right, if you're serious about this, you need to be careful. You're dealing with a guy who's not just arrogant, he's dangerous. But I've got your back. Let's see what we can dig up. Keanu felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Having Emma on his side gave him the strength he needed to take the next step. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about uncovering the truth and putting an end to Mallory's reign of terror. The next few days were filled with tension. Keanu kept his distance from the office, but he stayed in touch with some of his former colleagues who were still working there. The whispers were becoming clearer. Mallory had been cutting corners, hiring and firing employees without rhyme or reason, misappropriating funds, and manipulating stock prices for personal gain. Keanu couldn't ignore it any longer. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and they painted a picture of corporate greed that went far beyond what he could have imagined. One evening, Keanu got a call from Sarah, an old friend and former colleague who had recently left the company. She was anxious, speaking in hushed tones. Keanu, I've seen things that I shouldn't have. Mallory, he's been skimming off the top, using his position to line his pockets. But it's worse than that. He's involved in something bigger. And I think someone's going to get hurt. Keanu's heart raced. What do you mean? Who's involved? Sarah hesitated, then whispered, I don't know the details, but I've heard rumors of shady deals with outside companies, illegal contracts. And the way he's been handling the layoffs, it's all part of the plan to cover up something bigger. Keanu, you need to be careful. I'm worried about you. Keanu thanked her quickly and hung up, the weight of her words sinking in. This was bigger than he'd realized. Mallory wasn't just a corporate bully. He was a criminal. Now Keanu was faced with a decision: stay quiet, protect himself, and move on with his life, or expose Mallory for what he really was. But exposing him wouldn't be easy. It would take courage, allies, and most of all, it would take the right evidence. Keanu wasn't backing down, though. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. The conflict had only just begun. Keanu knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let Mallory's arrogance win. Not this time. What would you do if you found yourself in Keanu's shoes? Would you risk everything to expose the truth, or would you walk away? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of this gripping story. Keanu couldn't afford to waste any more time. The deeper he dug into the shady dealings of Richard Mallory, the more he realized how tangled the web of corruption was. If he was going to take this down, it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be fast. But Keanu was no stranger to tough battles. This time, however, the stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced. His mind raced with possibilities as he sat in his apartment, the dim glow of his laptop casting shadows over his determined face. He had collected enough hints to know Mallory wasn't just running a corrupt company. He was running a scheme that had ties to bigger players. The whispers were growing louder. People inside the company were nervous, some even scared for their lives. They knew what was happening, but didn't have the courage to speak out. Keanu had to be the one to do it. With Emma's help, Keanu started to uncover the trail. He'd tapped into company financial reports hidden away in encrypted files and reached out to a few trusted former employees who had seen things they weren't supposed to. The evidence was damning. There were illegal side contracts with third-party vendors, shell companies that funneled money to untraceable accounts, and worst of all, insider trading that Mallory was orchestrating. But Keanu knew this wasn't enough. The truth had to be exposed in a way that couldn't be ignored. He couldn't just go public with a few files. He needed hard, irrefutable proof. The kind of proof that would bring down a man like Mallory. He needed someone on the inside, someone who could get close to Mallory and gain access to the confidential information that would topple the empire Mallory had built. And that someone, he realized, might be someone who had been with the company longer than anyone else, someone who might even be loyal enough to help. Keanu's phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, his old friend. "I found something. A meeting. Tomorrow. You need to be there." Keanu's pulse quickened. It was an invitation he couldn't ignore. The next morning, Keanu met Sarah in a secluded park near the edge of the city. Sarah was nervous, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. "Keanu, this is big," she said, her voice hushed. "Mallory's been meeting with some very dangerous people with connections to organized crime. They're planning something, and I think they're using the company to launder money. I don't know what it all means, but if we don't stop this now, it's only going to get worse." Keanu's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just about corporate greed anymore. This was about criminal activity. His mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Sarah handed him a flash drive. "This has everything you need: meetings, transactions, and the most recent contracts they've signed with some very shady firms. If you go to the authorities with this, Mallory's done for. But, Keanu, you need to be careful. He's not going to let you get away with this." Keanu took the flash drive, his fingers trembling. "I don't have a choice anymore, Sarah. I can't just walk away from this." The plan was set in motion. Keanu would use the evidence on the flash drive to expose Mallory, but first, he needed to be sure that he had the right allies. Emma had been a constant source of support, but this was bigger than anything they had dealt with before. He needed someone with the right connections, someone who could move through the system without drawing attention. And that someone was his old lawyer, Luke Donovan. Luke was a straight shooter, a man who had helped Keanu navigate legal challenges in the past. Keanu hadn't spoken to him in years, but he knew he could trust him. After a quick call, Luke agreed to meet him the next day. They sat in a nondescript diner, far from the watchful eyes of the corporate world. Keanu slid the flash drive across the table. Luke's eyes flickered with interest as he took it in his hand. "What is this?" he asked, his tone serious. "It's the evidence that could bring down a CEO. Richard Mallory's been laundering money, defrauding investors, and running illegal deals under the radar. I need your help to get this to the authorities, but I need to be sure that it's done right." Luke studied him for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "This is risky, Keanu. You don't just take down someone like Mallory without a fight. You're going to make a lot of enemies." "I know," Keanu replied, his voice steady, "but I've already lost everything. What's left to lose?" Luke sighed. "All right, I'll get the ball rolling, but you need to lay low. If Mallory knows you're involved, he'll come after you. He's not the type to back down." Keanu nodded. "I understand, but I'm not backing down either." The plan was set in motion. Luke would start working with his contacts to bring the evidence to the authorities, while Keanu stayed off the radar, trying to avoid Mallory's wrath. But Keanu knew this was just the beginning. They were still a long way from bringing Mallory to justice. Every step was a risk, every move a potential trap. The next few days were filled with tension. Keanu stayed out of sight, only communicating with Luke and Emma when necessary. But all the while, his mind never stopped racing. Mallory was a dangerous man, and Keanu knew that if he wasn't careful, he would find himself at the center of a storm far bigger than he had imagined. He wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for his life. If you were in Keanu's shoes, how far would you go to bring someone like Mallory to justice? Would you risk everything, or would you find a way to escape? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see what happens next in this thrilling journey. The weight of Keanu's decision pressed down on him with every passing hour. With each step he took toward uncovering the truth about Richard Mallory, the stakes grew higher. The road ahead wasn't just about taking down a corrupt CEO, it was about exposing an entire network of deception and crime, one that could come crashing down on him and everyone he cared about. Keanu knew that the closer he got to the heart of the conspiracy, the more danger he would face. He had kept in contact with Luke, but the news was slow to come. Mallory, as expected, wasn't going down without a fight. Keanu was told to stay low, that the authorities needed time to get their hands on the full evidence. But the waiting was driving him crazy. The tension, the uncertainty, it was all starting to build inside him, threatening to spill over. Then the unthinkable happened. Keanu was walking back to his apartment one evening, mind preoccupied with the next steps, when his phone rang. It was Luke, but his voice didn't sound right. It was strained, urgent. "Keanu," Luke said, his voice tight. "Something's gone wrong. The evidence, it's gone. Mallory's people, they know about the drive. They've got their hands on it. We need to meet, now." Keanu's stomach dropped. He didn't need to ask how Mallory had found out. He knew it was only a matter of time. The game had changed, and Keanu was now squarely in Mallory's sights. Without wasting a moment, Keanu rushed to the meeting point Luke had specified, an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The place was deserted, the faint hum of the city's bustle distant in the background. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay as Keanu approached, his heart pounding in his chest. Luke was already there, looking over his shoulder with anxiety written all over his face. When Keanu reached him, Luke's eyes widened. "Keanu, I don't know what to say. Mallory's men, they're everywhere. We've been compromised. They know exactly what we're up to. The drive, the evidence, it's gone. We need to get out of here." Keanu's mind was racing. How did they find out? "I think someone tipped them off. There's a mole. Someone inside the investigation, but I don't know who," Luke said, frustration seeping through his words. Keanu felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He had trusted Luke. He'd trusted everyone involved in this plan. But now he was left in the dark. Mallory's influence was deep, and it was clear that no one was safe from his reach. But there was no time to dwell on that now. Keanu needed a plan. He couldn't let Mallory win. Just as the realization hit him, the sound of footsteps echoed through the abandoned warehouse, and Keanu's heart skipped a beat. Mallory's men were here. They had found him, and there was nowhere to run. Seconds felt like hours as Keanu and Luke looked for an exit. But it was too late. Figures appeared in the doorway, their silhouettes blocking the faint light from the street lamps outside. Keanu's pulse raced as the men stepped into the dimly lit space, their faces hard and unreadable. "Keanu," one of them said, his voice cold and steady. "We've been looking for you." Luke stepped forward, trying to shield Keanu. "You're not going to get away with this. People know what you're doing." The man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Oh, I think they do. But the question is, do you think anyone's going to believe you? Or will they just believe what we say about you?" The threat hung in the air. Keanu could feel his throat tightening, the fear creeping up on him, but he didn't let it show. He had to keep his wits about him. Mallory wasn't going to break him. Not now. "Tell Mallory," Keanu said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "He won't get away with this. People will find out. The truth always comes out." The man's expression darkened. "The truth? You think anyone will listen to the lies of a disgraced former employee? You'll never see the light of day again, Keanu." Keanu knew that this was it, the moment he'd been dreading, the moment that would decide everything. But just as the tension reached its peak, a familiar voice cut through the silence. "Leave him alone." It was Emma. She appeared from the shadows, standing in the doorway with a look of determination on her face. "Emma, what are you—" Keanu started, but she raised her hand to silence him. "Enough," she said, her tone firm. "You think you can threaten him? You're not getting away with this," one of the men sneered. "And what makes you think you can stop us?" "I've got friends who'd love to know about this little operation of yours," Emma said, her voice unwavering. "And if you don't walk out of here right now, I'll make sure you regret it." The tension between them crackled. Keanu watched as Emma stood her ground, her eyes locked on the men with fierce resolve. The seconds dragged on, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped entirely. Then, as if on cue, the men backed away, realizing they were outmatched. "This isn't over, Reeves," one of them spat, before they turned and left. disappearing into the night. Keanu exhaled, the adrenaline leaving his body in a rush. He turned. To Emma, his heart racing. "How did you—" "I had a feeling," Emma replied, her smile small but relieved. "I've been working behind the scenes, Keanu. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, but I've got some friends in the right places. We can still bring Mallory down." Keanu's chest swelled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I don't know what to say. You saved me." Emma laughed, but it was light, almost knowing. "I'm not done yet. This isn't over, but now we've got a real chance." Keanu realized for the first time since he'd started this journey that he wasn't alone. He had allies, people who believed in him, people who were willing to fight alongside him. This fight was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. What would you do if you found yourself in a life-or-death situation like Keanu? Would you have the courage to face the danger head-on? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this thrilling story. The dust had settled, at least for the moment. Keanu sat in the dimly lit corner of his apartment, staring at the phone in his hand. His mind raced, but his body was exhausted. The events of the past few days had taken everything out of him. From being fired by Richard Mallory to almost losing his life in that warehouse, Keanu knew he was deep into something bigger than he ever anticipated. And now, after Emma's timely intervention, the fight was far from over. But something had shifted. Keanu could feel it in the pit of his stomach. The pieces were coming together, and he finally had a glimpse of how it could all end. But the question remained, what will it cost me? The following days were a blur. Keanu stayed out of the public eye, keeping his head low. He knew Mallory wouldn't give up. The CEO would have made sure Keanu's name was smeared. Every step he took watched by those who worked for him. Yet Keanu remained resolute. With Emma by his side and Luke helping him navigate the legal minefield, they were working together like never before. But the emotional toll was undeniable. Keanu often found himself staring out of his apartment window, wondering how it all had gone so wrong. His career, once promising and secure, had been ripped away in the blink of an eye. The trust he had placed in people, friends, colleagues, even the ones he thought he could rely on, had crumbled. How did I get here? He wasn't just fighting Mallory anymore. He was fighting a system, a broken system that rewarded power and greed, crushed anyone who dared to stand up, and showed no mercy to those who lost their way. Yet Keanu couldn't give up. Not now, not when he had come this far. Keanu met with Emma one evening, the soft hum of a coffee shop providing the backdrop to their conversation. She had been a constant source of support, and now they had something concrete, something that could finally take down Mallory. "We've got the smoking gun," Emma said, her voice low. She slid a folder across the table. "It's all here, every illegal deal, every shady transaction. This is the proof we need to destroy Mallory and everything he's built." Keanu's heart pounded as he looked at the documents. He knew this wasn't just paperwork. This was a ticking time bomb. If Mallory's criminal network found out they were this close, they wouldn't hesitate to end it all for Keanu, and for everyone involved. But if they succeeded, everything would change. Mallory's empire would crumble, and Keanu would have a chance to rebuild his life. But as the weight of the folder settled in his hands, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't just about winning. It was about making the right choice, the one that would bring justice, not just revenge. "Are you sure about this?" Keanu asked, looking up at Emma. "Once we hand this over, there's no going back." Emma's eyes were steady, unwavering. "I'm sure. It's the only way to make sure Mallory and his people pay for everything they've done. We have to do this, Keanu, for everyone who's been hurt by this." Keanu nodded. He knew she was right. But deep down, a small part of him questioned whether there was another way, whether he could have moved on with his life, leaving everything behind. Yet every fiber of his being screamed that he couldn't walk away. Not now. The next day, Keanu made his way to the authorities, the folder clutched tightly in his hands. He met with Luke first, who had been working tirelessly to ensure they had the right contacts in place. Keanu felt the cold sweat on his palms as he handed over the evidence. "This is it, Luke. This is everything." Luke took the folder, looking through the contents with a professional eye. He looked up at Keanu, his expression grave. "This will do it, Keanu. Mallory won't be able to wiggle his way out of this. But be prepared for what comes next. It won't be easy." Keanu didn't answer. His mind was already racing, preparing for the worst. The confrontation with Mallory wasn't going to be pretty. It wasn't just a battle for power. It was a battle for survival. Hours later, Keanu stood outside the courthouse, his heart pounding. The weight of the situation hit him full force. This wasn't just about exposing a corrupt CEO. This was about his future, about his redemption. And then the doors to the courthouse opened. Emma walked out, her face pale, but her eyes locked on Keanu with a look of triumph. Behind her, Luke followed, his expression hard to read. "We did it," Emma said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Mallory's been arrested. The evidence is irrefutable. He's done." Keanu's heart skipped a beat. "It's over?" "Not yet," Luke said, stepping forward. "It's going to take time for the legal process to unfold, but we've done everything we can. The rest is out of our hands now." Keanu felt a sense of relief flood over him, but it was bittersweet. He hadn't expected to feel this way. The victory wasn't complete without the emotional healing that needed to come afterward. Mallory's arrest was the first step, but there was still so much left to rebuild. Weeks passed, and the dust continued to settle. The company's scandalous fall from grace dominated the headlines, and Keanu found himself an unwilling public figure. He'd become a symbol of someone who had stood up against the system, against corruption, and he had the scars to prove it. But as the days turned into weeks, Keanu began to heal. He started to find peace again, though it wasn't without its struggles. He still had moments of doubt, but he knew that everything he had gone through had changed him. He wasn't the man he once was. He was stronger, wiser, more aware of the world around him. Keanu's thoughts drifted to the lessons he had learned through all of this. The importance of loyalty, the dangers of trusting blindly, and the power of standing up for what was right. He had lost everything, but in doing so he had found something far more valuable: his integrity. What would you have done in Keanu's shoes? Would you have the strength to keep fighting for what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to continue following Keanu's incredible journey to redemption. As the dust settled from the dramatic fall of Richard Mallory, Keanu sat in the quiet of his apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The battle was over, but the war within himself wasn't quite finished. He had torn down an empire, exposed the dark secrets of those who had once stood at the top of the corporate ladder, but now Keanu had to rebuild his life from the ground up. It hadn't been an easy journey, and there were days when the weight of the past seemed too heavy to bear. The emotional scars from losing his career, his reputation, and his trust in people were something he carried with him every day. But there was also a new understanding, an understanding of what really mattered. Keanu glanced at his phone, where notifications flashed up constantly. News outlets reporting on the fall of Mallory, interviews, and even messages from old friends and acquaintances, all reaching out to congratulate him on his success. But the message that stood out the most was from Emma. "Keanu, we did it. But don't forget, there's a whole world out there waiting for you. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a new chapter." Her words rang in his mind. She was right. The past couldn't define him forever. He had fought for justice. But now it was time to reclaim his life. Keanu knew that his journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. A few days later, Keanu met with Emma at a quiet cafe. As he took a seat across from her, he could see the same sense of satisfaction in her eyes that he felt in his chest. Together they had taken down a man who had hurt so many, but they also realized that the real work, the work of healing, would take far longer. "So, what now?" Keanu asked, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. What happens after all of this? Emma smiled gently, as if she had been expecting the question. Now, Keanu, you move on. You take everything you've learned and build something better. You have the power to make choices now, choices you never had before. Keanu thought about the months of pain, the countless sleepless nights, and the intense fear of the unknown. That had consumed him for so long. It wasn't just about fighting for his own justice anymore. It was about rediscovering who he was without the shadows of Mallory's influence hanging over him. I've been thinking about it, Keanu admitted. I want to do something that matters. I don't want to keep looking back. Emma's expression softened. And you will. You've already proved that you can stand up against the hardest challenges. You'll find your place again. Keanu nodded. As Emma said, the journey was far from over. He wasn't just fighting for, justice anymore. He was fighting for himself, to become the person he'd always wanted to be, the person who would no longer be bound by fear or the past. Over the next few weeks, Keanu slowly began to rebuild. He didn't rush into anything, but he started to take on smaller projects that aligned with his values, investing time in mentorship for younger professionals, getting involved with charities that supported workers who had been affected by corporate greed, and slowly regaining a sense of purpose outside of the world he once knew. There were still moments of doubt. Would anyone believe in him again? Would they forget the drama surrounding his fall from grace? But Keanu knew that the only way forward was to keep moving, to take each day as it came. He realized that his story wasn't over. It was still unfolding. The lessons he had learned through his fight against Mallory, the losses, the victories, the friendships, these were the things that would shape his future. And so, Keanu Reeves, the man who had once been fired in disgrace, found himself standing, taller than ever before, ready to face whatever the future had in store. Keanu had made it through the storm, but just when he thought he could finally breathe, life, as always, had other plans. It was the quiet after the storm that allowed him to reflect. The silence gave him the time he needed to think about what had happened, but also what was yet to come. A month had passed since Mallory's arrest, and Keanu had started rebuilding his life, brick by brick. He'd been contacted by a handful of companies, people who had once turned their backs on him, but now saw him as a symbol of resilience. He had also received offers from legal firms, asking him to work on consulting cases involving corporate corruption. But for Keanu, it was never about the money or the recognition. As he sat at his small desk, now cluttered with various files and documents about potential opportunities, his mind wandered back to the past. He thought about the friends he had made along the way, especially Emma, who had stood by him through it all. She was a reminder that despite the darkest times, some people would never let you fall alone. But even with all the success coming his way, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. He had the resources, the opportunities, but he still felt unsettled, like something larger was calling him. A deeper purpose was waiting to be discovered. One evening, Keanu received an unexpected message. It wasn't from a potential client, nor was it from anyone connected to the legal case against Mallory. Instead, it was from a mysterious individual who simply signed off with the name Avery. The message was brief. Keanu, I know what you've been through, and I believe you're the person we need. We need you to investigate something bigger, something that could change everything. The choice is yours, but be warned, this isn't a road. That leads to safety. The message caught Keanu off guard. It was cryptic, alarming even, but part of him felt a rush of adrenaline. Something bigger? Was this a new opportunity to fight for justice, or was this another trap? The decision was not an easy one. The logical part of him told him to stay put, to keep moving forward with the projects that were already in motion. But another part of him, the part that had kept him going through the toughest moments, knew he couldn't let it go. There was something about this message, something that beckoned him to take a leap of faith. Keanu responded cautiously, "Who are you, and what exactly are you asking me to do?" The next morning, Keanu received a reply. This time there was an attachment, a document that appeared to have been sent from an encrypted source. As Keanu opened it, his eyes widened in disbelief. The document detailed a powerful conglomerate, one even bigger than the company Mallory had once run. This new group, known as the Coalition, controlled everything from the media to the most influential tech companies in the world. But what made this group dangerous was the shadowy nature of their operations. They had their hands in political corruption, corporate espionage, and even environmental manipulation. Keanu couldn't believe what he was reading. The Coalition had been operating under the radar for years, with little to no oversight. Yet somehow, they had managed to keep their operations hidden from the public eye. And now it seemed someone wanted Keanu to bring it all to light. But this wasn't just a battle for corporate justice. This was much bigger. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. A part of Keanu wanted to ignore the message, walk away, and continue with his life. But deep down, he knew that he was the only one who could take on this fight. No one else had the courage, the knowledge, or the resilience to stand up to an organization like this. Days passed as Keanu pondered the decision. He spent his time meeting with a few trusted people, Emma, Luke, and a few former colleagues, trying to gather information and gauge their reactions. Everyone was supportive, but everyone also shared a similar sentiment. This was too dangerous. "You're not just going up against another CEO," Luke warned him, concern etched across his face. "This is a global network. You're talking about putting your life at risk on a level you've never experienced." Keanu nodded, absorbing his words. "I know, Luke. But I've seen what these kinds of people can do, and I can't stand by and let them continue to hurt others. We didn't take down Mallory just to let another monster take his place." Emma, who had been silent for most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "I get it, Keanu. But you have to think about what this means for you, too. You're not the same man you were a year ago. You fought hard to rebuild your life. Don't throw it all away." Keanu sat back in his chair, the weight of their words pressing down on him. But he couldn't ignore the feeling inside him, the call to action that had driven him since the beginning. He had to do something about it. After much thought, Keanu made his decision. He was going to take the risk. Keanu contacted Avery, agreeing to meet in person. The meeting would take place in a small, inconspicuous cafe, away from prying eyes. As the hour approached, Keanu's nerves began to stir. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that his life was about to change once again. As he entered the cafe, Keanu scanned the room, his eyes landing on a person sitting in the corner. A man, dressed in dark clothing, his face partially obscured by sunglasses. When their eyes met, Keanu's heart skipped a beat. The man stood up and approached. "Keanu Reeves?" he asked quietly. Keanu nodded, his senses on high alert. The man sat back down. "My name is Avery. What I'm about to tell you changes everything. Would you take the risk if you were in Keanu's shoes? Would you confront the shadows, knowing that it could cost you everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to follow Keanu's journey as he takes on a new, terrifying challenge." Keanu's pulse quickened as he sat across from Avery, still unsure of who this person really was or what he was about to get into. The quiet hum of the cafe surrounded them, but the air felt charged, thick with anticipation. Avery's intense gaze never left Keanu as he spoke in a calm, controlled voice. "We don't have much time. The Coalition has been operating under the radar for decades, and they've established a web of power that stretches across the globe. It's not just about business, Keanu. It's about control, manipulation, and influence. They've infiltrated governments, media outlets, technology firms, the works." Keanu leaned forward, the weight of the situation beginning to settle in. He had heard of powerful groups like this before, shadowy organizations manipulating events behind the scenes, but he had never imagined that such a group could operate so close to the heart of power. "So why me?" Keanu asked. "Why did you choose me to help bring them down?" Avery's lips twitched into something that could almost be called a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because you're not afraid of the truth, Keanu. You've already taken down one empire. You've faced down betrayal and personal loss, but this is different. You have the strength, and more importantly, you have the skills to expose them. And the Coalition knows that if anyone can destroy them, it's you." Keanu's mind raced. He had seen the aftermath of Mallory's fall, the collateral damage, the enemies that had come out of the woodwork, but this was something much darker, something more dangerous. Could he really take on an organization of this scale? Did he even have a choice? "And what's in it for you?" Keanu asked, his voice cutting through the tension. "Why are you involved?" Avery leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We've been tracking them for years. My team and we've been gathering intel, uncovering their network. But it's too big for us to dismantle on our own. We need someone with inside knowledge, someone who's fought corporate corruption before and who knows how to navigate these treacherous waters. That's you, Keanu." Keanu thought for a moment. It sounded like an impossible task. Yet as Avery laid out the details, Keanu could sense that this was no ordinary fight. This was a battle for more than just money or power. It was a battle for the very soul of the world's most influential systems. Avery pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "This is what we know so far," he said quietly, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "The coalition has its hands in everything, from healthcare and the stock market to global political decisions. They've been manipulating the world's events for decades, pulling strings behind the scenes, and no one has even noticed. But they're running out of time, and we're running out of chances to stop them." Keanu opened the folder slowly, scanning through pages of documents filled with names, dates, and organizations that all seemed to lead back to one central force. The web was far more complex than he had ever imagined. There were politicians, tech moguls, media tycoons, all seemingly aligned in ways that made Keanu question the very fabric of society. This is insane," Keanu muttered, flipping through the pages. He could see the connections, the endless network of power and deceit, the people involved, all of them complicit in keeping the coalition's dark secrets hidden. "And this is just the beginning," Avery said. "We've only scratched the surface, but we need you to help us get the evidence to expose their ties. This will change everything. If we succeed, it will be the end of the coalition's stranglehold on the world. But there's no turning back once we start." Keanu took a deep breath. The stakes had never been higher. He had already walked through fire once before, but this felt like something that could burn everything he had built to the ground. "What's the plan?" Keanu asked, his voice steady, determined. Avery pulled out another document, this one labeled Operation Vanguard. "We've infiltrated some of their lower-level operatives, but we need to go straight to the top. We need to expose their financial operations, their illegal dealings, and tie it all to the people in charge. You'll be our key to getting in and accessing their inner circle. But it's dangerous. You'll be putting your life at risk." Keanu's heart pounded in his chest. The plan was risky, but what choice did he have? He knew how far-reaching corruption could be, and now there was a chance to stop it, to expose the puppet masters behind it all. That night, Keanu didn't sleep. He couldn't. His mind kept replaying everything Avery had said. The dangers, the risks, the lives at stake. He was no longer just fighting for his own redemption. He was fighting for a world that didn't even realize it was being controlled. It was clear. The coalition had to be stopped, and Keanu Reeves was going to be the one to do it. The next morning, Keanu made his decision. He wasn't backing down this time. He would dive into the world of shadows, knowing that everything he had worked for could be lost. But as he had learned through his struggle with Mallory, sometimes you had to risk everything to protect the things that really mattered. He picked up his phone, sending a simple message to Avery. "I'm in. Let's bring them down. What would you do in Keanu's shoes? Would you take on the coalition knowing the risks, or would you walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next chapter of Keanu's journey as he dives into the heart of darkness, ready to take on his biggest challenge yet. The days leading up to the operation felt like a blur for Keanu. Every moment seemed like a delicate balance between hope and fear. He'd made his decision. He was going to bring down the coalition, no matter what it took. But the weight of the plan, the risks, the people he was about to face, had never felt so real. Keanu spent countless hours going over the details Avery had given him, studying the operations, the key players, the critical data they needed. His life was about to change forever, and he knew there was no going back once the ball was rolling. The plan was in motion. It wasn't a matter of if they would take down the coalition, but when. Avery had secured an in with one of the lower-level operatives who was connected to the upper echelons of the group. The person was a former insider, someone who had turned whistleblower, someone who knew the coalition's dirty secrets firsthand. This was Keanu's chance to get the hard evidence that would expose the organization's global reach. Keanu couldn't afford any mistakes. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. The stakes were higher than ever before. The night before the operation, Keanu sat alone in his apartment, staring out at the city skyline. His thoughts drifted to his past, the struggles, the betrayals, and the lessons he had learned along the way. It was all leading to this moment. No matter the outcome, Keanu knew that he was fighting for more than just justice for himself. He was fighting for a future free from the invisible chains the coalition had placed on the world. Emma had checked in with him earlier, expressing concern but also offering her unwavering support. "Whatever happens, Keanu, you're not alone in this," she had said. Those words stuck with him, providing a sense of strength he hadn't expected. He wasn't alone, not in the fight, not in his journey, not anymore. The next morning, Keanu met Avery and his team at a discreet location. The operation was set to begin. Keanu's role was clear: infiltrate the coalition's financial back channels and extract the critical information that could link them directly to illicit activities. Every move had to be precise. One slip, and they would lose everything. Keanu was fully aware of the dangers, but there was no turning back now. He couldn't stop the mission, even if it meant facing the wrath of those at the top of the coalition. As they made their way through the covert meeting points, Keanu's mind raced. This wasn't just about gathering intel anymore. The pieces were all coming together. Avery, the whistleblower, and Keanu were about to walk into the heart of the beast. The coalition's network, sprawling and virtually invisible, was about to be exposed. But how would it all play out? They arrived at an underground bunker, hidden deep beneath the city's business district. The air inside was cold, sterile and filled with tension. This was the heart of the coalition's operations, a fortress designed to protect its most valuable secrets. Keanu's heart beat faster as the door to the operations room opened. There, at a table cluttered with laptops and papers, sat their insider, the whistleblower who had promised to deliver the goods. "Are you ready?" Avery asked quietly as he gestured toward the man. Keanu nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. The insider handed him a hard drive, one that contained the irrefutable evidence they had been hunting for. It was time to expose the coalition for what it was. "Once we get this into the right hands," the insider said, his voice shaky, "the whole world will know what they've done. You've got to promise me you'll finish what we started, no matter what happens." Keanu met his gaze, feeling the weight of the promise. "I will. You have my word." The moment they began to leave, disaster struck. A sharp alarm blared through the bunker. Keanu's stomach sank. He knew immediately what was happening. They had been compromised. "Go, go, go!" Avery shouted as he motioned for Keanu to follow. They rushed through the narrow hallways, but it was too late. Armed coalition agents appeared at every turn, locking down the exits. The plan had fallen apart, and now they were trapped. Keanu's mind raced. He had the evidence, but getting out alive was no longer a certainty. He could hear footsteps approaching, their pursuers closing in fast. This is it, Keanu thought. This is the moment where everything changes. In a split-second decision, Keanu grabbed the hard drive and ran toward a nearby storage room. There was no time to think about escape routes or backup plans. He had to act on instinct. His training had prepared him for moments like this, moments where every second counted. Avery caught up with him just as the door slammed shut. "Keanu, we need to move. This is the only way out." But as they turned to make their way through a narrow passageway, they were ambushed by a group of coalition agents. Keanu's heart raced, but his training kicked in. He took a defensive stance, ready to fight back, but Avery held him back. "Don't fight them yet. We can make it out through the back door," Avery urged, his voice full of urgency. Keanu nodded, trusting Avery's judgment. With quick thinking, they found a small back exit, hidden from the agents. It was their only chance. As they finally emerged into the sunlight, Keanu's chest was tight with adrenaline. They had made it out, but it wasn't over yet. The real battle had just begun. Keanu looked at Avery, who seemed unfazed by the danger they had just escaped. "Now what?" "Now," Avery said, pulling out his phone, "we send this to the world. We expose the coalition and take them down. For good." The hard drive made its way into the hands of the right people. What followed was nothing short of explosive. The evidence leaked, implicating politicians, tech giants, and high-ranking officials in a global conspiracy. The coalition's empire was crumbling, and the world began to wake up to the corruption that had been hiding in plain sight for so long. Keanu watched from the sidelines as the storm began to rage. He had done what he set out to do, but the consequences were far-reaching. The world would never be the same, but neither would he. He had taken on the shadows, and now he had emerged, victorious. But at what cost? What do you think of Keanu's decision to confront the coalition? Was it worth the risk? If you were in his shoes, would you have done the same? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. For more exciting stories of resilience and triumph,